Welcome everyone. Today we have the great Søren Becher on the show. I don't even need to introduce Søren. Who doesn't know Søren? Søren is the mastermind analyst on Tesla. Some of the best models for Tesla and robotaxi come from Søren. We have, of course, Søren, the space mind, right? It's about SpaceX, and also we talked about MicroStrategy. But today we are going to focus on SpaceX and Tesla and the merger and the big debate that's going on all over the place. I think Rebellionaire started the whole thing by saying, this is all a bad idea. We will all be betrayed by this Tesla merger as Tesla shareholders. So I want to jump right in with Søren. Welcome, Søren, of course.
Joe, it's great to be here. Thank you for that kind introduction. I feel like I'm one of many, many people in the Tesla community that contribute to helping everybody understand this company.
Yeah, but
I don't know that I have anything great to share, but collectively we're pretty strong.
I think we have a unique setup with Tesla that we have actually a series of original thinkers, which is very rare. It's rare in journalism and it's rare in financial analysis. Normally one dude on boots on the ground in Iraq that writes something up and then everyone copies him. And the same is true when it comes to finance. There's one guy normally for a stock who thinks of something and then all the banks copy this guy. Here it's a little different. We have Søren as an original thinker and a few others. So let's talk about it. The SpaceX IPO is coming up very soon. We hear all kinds of cool information. And the merger is, of course, unclear if it happens or not. But Alexandra and some other experts think it will definitely happen. Chamath said it's 99% sure. I personally also think it's very sure. So first of all, what is your thinking? Does it happen? How sure are you? And when?
Well, it's interesting. I think when there's people that are close to Elon, like Chamath, when people like that are talking about it, that gives you, I think, a pretty strong signal. You know, I think it was Chamath that had suggested that SpaceX do something with Anthropic, right? And lo and behold, 10 days later, a deal is announced.
I think it was like two days later or something.
Maybe 2 days, right? So was it really his suggestion or was it really just him kind of in the know? So I think we need to listen to those tea leaves. So, you know, whatever we may think, you need to be aware of what others are saying. And somebody that would know, like Chamath is close enough to Elon that he might know. Now, obviously, he has to be very careful about what he says, and whether he is or not, I guess, remains to be seen. What do I personally think? Well, if I'm putting on my very long-term hat, it is very clear that both of these companies would be better together than apart. If I'm not worried about the stock price impact and all that, just putting the two companies together, the collective enterprise would be in a better place because Elon wouldn't be shackled by any issues between what's fair between the two companies. He could run it like one company and just optimize everything like he does for Tesla and SpaceX. However, it's not that simple. He's got two different sets of shareholders, and certainly some shareholders own both, but two very different sets of shareholders in that regard. And so the question is then, it comes down to timing and what's the fair exchange between the two. I understand the viewpoint of many Tesla shareholders of we've been waiting for robotaxi. We've been waiting for a re-rating of Tesla stock, that robotaxi is not fully reflected in Tesla stock. Sure, Tesla has a high PE, but it's nothing compared to what's coming in terms of the growth of Tesla. I get that. Also, I'm listening to people that are in the know on SpaceX, and I'm hearing what they're saying about the future potential of that company. And so I've publicly challenged the narrative, and I've taken a few slings and arrows for it, of, Tesla is due for a re-rating. SpaceX has already had their move. Tesla, therefore, is going to outperform. We should therefore let SpaceX come to market, let Tesla outperform, and then consider a merger a year or two down the road. So I've raised the issue of, that's great. But what happens if SpaceX stock continues to outperform Tesla? SpaceX, in my mind, is a unique company. It's one of one. And it's going after probably one of the biggest market opportunities that humanity's ever created. And that's the quote-unquote continent of space. Imagine being able to invest in North America back in the early days and being able to buy up all the land ahead of everybody else. Well, this is what SpaceX effectively has the opportunity to do. Sure, there are some issues about when is that actual revenue ramp going to really happen for SpaceX? Certainly Starlink. There's some exciting things there. In terms of the orbital data center opportunity, that's maybe a few years out and we can talk more about that. But still, what's the value of a company that no one right now can compete with, that has this blue sky opportunity of space?
Black sky.
Black sky opportunity, to coin a new term. Yeah.
Well, I would agree with that, only that on top of agreeing with you, I think America is a nice example, but we are talking about something bigger. In case you are not familiar, in case the viewers are not familiar with geography, it's not even geography, spaceography. Space is significantly larger than North America. I don't know the exact number, something infinite probably.
Orders of magnitude.
Infinite orders of magnitude. Yeah, it's very large, this thing. And it has a lot of space, free space. And I think the most important and meaningful thing that changed for me in November last year, for Elon probably not much before that, probably a year before I got it, is that there's a business model now. Because it's great to have space. Same thing, it's great to have America, but it needed like whatever it was, beaver furs, I don't know, timber, something. Like they figured out something they can transport back. Someone did the math and it's like, wait, I send a ship, it comes back, I have more money than before. How much of that stuff exists in North America? Oh, infinity. Or maybe I should build infinity ships and send infinity settlers. That's exactly what happened. But it only can happen once the ship comes back and has more money. Owner has more money than he had before. That's like a very magic moment. And that magic moment was completely missing in space. It was sending ships out and having $10 billion less every time until very recently. Starlink was the first little thing, but now we have orbital AI. And it seems like that is truly the biggest business model ever because by definition, it's infinite. That's what I find so fascinating. That's a business model where you don't need any fantasy. It works from day one. It's profitable from day one if the orbital launch costs are below a certain threshold. And then you can scale the exact business model into infinity. That's very fascinating.
Infinity is an interesting number. And what does infinity mean on the valuation of a company that has an infinity-like opportunity?
Something big, I guess.
Something big. And it's going to defy traditional valuation metrics. Anybody that says SpaceX is trading at a PE of X or a revenue multiple of Y is missing what's happening here and missing where the value is. The other thing, too, I would just add to what you're saying is let's imagine that on Earth, we develop a new source of energy. And the cost of that is 1/10 of the cheapest cost of energy we have on the planet today. What do you think would happen in that situation? Well, you would have a rush of development to that source of energy, wherever that may be in the world. And it could be, if it's in Antarctica, that's where the development would go. Okay. Now it's in space, and you're creating this cheap, abundant source of energy in space. What do you think is going to happen? Well, you're going to have a rush of activity into space, and it's not just orbital data centers. It's not just communication satellites. It's everything that you can think of that uses energy in large amounts. Not to mention the manufacturing processes that could benefit from being in a low G or zero G environment. And there's a whole bunch of those. That's the bigger opportunity here. Orbital data centers is big enough, but I'm just adding to that and saying there's a lot more too. There's going to be a lot more demand for SpaceX's launch services beyond Google's and Amazon's and Microsoft and whoever else putting data centers in space along with SpaceX.
Yeah, I agree. But I think the special situation is that these data centers could be truly an infinite business opportunity because the question is how much intelligence do we need? And I think the answer is infinite because intelligence is the only good that converts directly into economic growth, like directly into economic value with no ceiling. Because as long as you want to do something, you need more intelligence. And I assume people keep wanting to do something. And that's the exciting thing, that this is a truly infinitely scalable business model. Not to discount any of what you said. Of course, there's much, much more to do, but having one infinity thing is already good. And I think that's important to understand. You can build infinity numbers of gigawatt data centers in space and will always be able to sell the tokens. And we will always be short of tokens into eternity until this thing kills us probably. But that's a different story for a different time. So that's why I'm so excited. This is truly infinitely scalable once you crack the initial economics. And that could be very close.
It's interesting, though, and you would know this as an economist, is that you're going to have competition for who gets that launch. Yeah. So the question is then who's going to pay the most for the launch? Even though launch costs are coming down, it's going to be constrained for a while until they start launching thousands of them a year. And the question is then who's going to be willing to pay the launch costs of getting their data center, their manufacturing process into space. And so that's kind of interesting too to think about. Are the companies looking to put data centers in space the ones that are going to be willing to pay the most? Or will somebody else come along and say, no, actually, I want to put my Bitcoin mining in space, or no, I want to put my pharmaceutical manufacturing in space, or whatever other examples there are. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. That may be a surprise to people who think it's just going to be orbital data centers that launches along with Starlinks. I'm here to say that there may be some other companies, other industries lining up to say, no, we actually would like to put our stuff in space too.
Including the Air Force, which is one of the most important, or the Space Force, I don't know.
Space Force.
Government, and that's something I'm working on a video on that is a very important thing, that besides all the commercial interest in space, there's this national security interest of enormous proportions. Because since the dawn of war, owning the higher ground was a key success factor for winning any war. From artillery to whatever, like you need to be higher than the enemy. And what's the highest thing you can be? Space. Right? And if you dominate space, I mean, I don't need to explain to anyone what that means. You own the satellites, you can shoot down the other satellites, you would knock out any enemy, right? If you dominate space like that. And that's also a very interesting national security issue with SpaceX for every other country, right? What does it actually mean for Russia and China and Europe, like for everyone? Are they completely beaten at this point? Because once you dominate space like that, it's also the nuclear threat, everything is gone. I mean, for you. For the other guys, it's the opposite. They are completely sitting ducks. They just have to obey. And so that's going to be a very interesting topic. Like, can China or whoever like use SpaceX, or is this completely taboo? What if a Chinese company wants to book something to shoot an AI satellite into space? Like, is that allowed? I don't even know. Or is everything just American companies? If it's a European company, what if they have a contract with a Chinese company and put in their chips? And this goes right into national security, because if you have 1 million Chinese AI satellites, like who even knows what they do? Like they could be There's a new contract, defense contract for Starlink up, where Starlink delivers intelligence for 1.7 billion a year to the Pentagon. So once you have all the Chinese satellites on SpaceX up, so this is going to be interesting. Is it just taboo? Is it just not allowed to accept any foreign deal, or what? So we are talking about a whole new thing. And on top of that, these satellites, whoever shoots them up, Google, soon Oracle, Microsoft, and Amazon, in my opinion, but Google and XAI, of course, under what laws do they operate? Is that just their own country, space? They can do whatever they want up there? That's another interesting thing.
I think that remains to be seen. I think as long as it's around Earth, I'm sure that the quote-unquote laws on Earth will apply. But what's clear to me is that we're going to also put weapons system up into space. One, to protect the AI data centers and other valuable satellites that are up there. So that's interesting. And then, of course, the conflicts are in space. And of course, as you mentioned, the high ground, you want to make sure that you've got superior capabilities over anybody else. We certainly are not going to be happy if China puts up a bunch of military weapons systems into space that has the potential to destroy all the satellites that we've ever launched. We're not going to stand for that. So there's going to be another arms race in space. And from a commercial standpoint, I suppose that's good for SpaceX, but it's going to raise a whole other set of issues of mutually assured destruction kind of scenarios again. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it.
But it's an interesting thing that the United States has a monopoly with SpaceX. And so how do you, not a monopoly, but a 99% topoly. Like they basically completely dominate orbital lift infrastructure for the next 10 years or something, or longer. So that's an interesting situation.
And back to the Tesla plus SpaceX merger scenario, if you want to inoculate yourself from government interference, you merge the two companies because the government needs SpaceX, and therefore the government needs SpaceX plus Tesla if they're combined.
Yeah, let's talk about this, Søren, because there is a lot of concern in the Tesla community about this. And I think the more you think about this, the more it becomes crystal clear that a merger is super beneficial for Tesla shareholders long-term, maybe mid-term. Mm-hmm. So depending what that means, 3 years, 2 years. So I think if we had an honest discussion with the entire community, I think I could get everyone to agree this is very strong long-term. So the main concern is, and I heard this from in my community, is that, Joe, I'm like, whatever, 70 years old. I need my money. I waited for 5 years. I don't want to wait another 36 months and take a hit on something that would now go up very likely. And first I was instinctively saying, dudes, you're wrong on this. Then I did my math, and I do think actually that this will be short-term bad for Tesla, because I believe the SpaceX IPO will be very hyped, and we can discuss this maybe first. What you think where SpaceX stock will be 1 year from the IPO, higher or lower than the IPO, and by what margin in 12 months from the IPO?
Well, I can throw out a guess, and my guess would be higher, but I'm fully aware that there's no way to know. There's so many different things that could happen between now and then. SpaceX, again, for me, is a one-of-one kind of company. They're pursuing a unique opportunity, as you mentioned, is virtually infinite. What kind of valuation do you put on a company that is infinite? This is unheard of. Like we're breaking new ground in terms of valuation for a company like SpaceX. It's going to be certainly limited in the short term by their ability to put starships up into space. And certainly, we heard today that Elon is making 10 more starships this year, 5 more boosters, and that's max capacity. Well, that's not enough. Obviously, they'll ramp that over time.
Hey, on this channel, we do something very important. We deeply analyze, understand, and predict capital, AGI, and politics. Not just to beat the markets and make a lot of money, even though that's important, but also to build a new society and make the future good for all of us, the pioneers. If you want to help me on this journey, you can do that by doing a very simple thing. Like and subscribe. It helps me a lot. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get back to the video.
So, I do think that SpaceX will do very well at the IPO. The shares are going to be in massive demand. We've got this whole index buying thing. So we could see a melt up, and the higher the melt up, then I think the bigger the subsequent sort of, downturn might be. But it might only be for 3 or 6 or 9 months. And then some of the things that SpaceX is working on starts to catch up, and some of the excitement starts to build. As we see more progress towards orbital data centers, I could easily see SpaceX then reaching new highs on that again. Now, I don't know what the time frame of that is. It might be a year or 2 or 3, depending on delays. But I do have some probability that SpaceX has this IPO at 1.75 trillion. It trades up to 2.25 trillion and keeps going, because we've never seen an opportunity like this. Again, it's like the Dutch East India Company that just has a market opportunity like no other company.
Well, my concern is, here's what I think. I think there's no doubt of the market, unless the market crashes now, which might happen, but let's see what Iran and everything does, and oil. But let's assume we stay where we are or go up. I think the odds that this will be super hyped is very high, because when the market is bullish, to your point, infinite TAM, and a lot of people get that. Even Fidelity, private, the private investment arm, and everyone gets it, which is surprising. My concern is this runs on fumes, of course, of hope, until you get the cash flow forcing function in, right? Everyone knows that. And the problem is, between then and now and then, you basically rely on the market being bullish, because you know how it is. If everyone panics and freaks out, then everyone says, whatever, no cash, like just get it down to 1 trillion, just cut it in half.
Sure.
That will definitely happen in a crash, because no one even cares. And the stories are out of the window. So the longer you have between the IPO and that point in time, the more risk you take that there will be some crash correction of the market, and this thing just gets completely brutally hit because it's a growth, like a fantasy stock. You can have the best fantasy and the best story, you're still getting killed when things go south, right? And so therefore, I think the odds are high that we see a lower share price between IPO and whatever that point. And the risk assessment I have is like, okay, what is that point? Is Starlink enough to get this up, or do we need orbital data centers? I think we do need orbital data centers, but I think there might be a little sooner coming than people think, because it's not rocket science, no pun intended, to build an AI satellite. I think people vastly overestimate how complicated this is. Like, it's basically 90% done at this point and probably 100% end of the year, or 95%. And I think it's all a function of Starship. Like, when does Starship actually work? Because that is rocket science, and that is a little risky. But it can go both directions. We could be done this year with this thing, reusability and everything. So what's your estimate on? And what I said in my model is that as Tesla shareholders, I think the odds that not merging is a better deal for Tesla shareholders in the next 12 months is actually high. I think it inflects around 12 to 18 months from now, where it's very likely that a merged entity makes you way more money than Tesla alone. But until then, you might have made more money if you don't merge.
Sure. Yeah.
My estimation. Like, I think even if SpaceX goes up more, Tesla probably would go up faster in the next 12 to 18 months. That's my estimation based on a little modeling.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting. I'll take a little diversion here, but I want to come back to sort of SpaceX's business. The diversion is that imagine you've got a company that makes cars, and along comes a new idea to make them autonomous. And you've got a whole bunch of shareholders in this car company that say, you promised that you would make 20 million cars. I want those promises to be achieved before you go chasing autonomy. Okay? Is there a parallel today to that situation, to today's situation where you've got investors in a company that say, I want the promise of autonomy that you've been telling me about for the last 5 years to be achieved before you go chasing another opportunity of making chips and AI data centers and merging with SpaceX and introducing a whole other element to this business? Are those two parallel things? My point with that is that companies must always look to the long term in positioning themselves, never the short term. Now, I totally feel for the shareholders, and they want the gains that they deserve. But there's no way to run a company. You don't want to run a company just to reward a set of shareholders, put the future on hold, and then once that reward has happened, then shift gears, because this AI thing is not slowing down. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but things are moving pretty fast. This is tricky because this gets very emotional for people really fast. And I've discovered this in trying to have this conversation online, is that many people feel like, well, this opportunity with SpaceX will be here in 2 or 3 years. We don't need to act now. And my point with that is, well, Elon's going to decide that. That's not up to us to force the two companies to merge. My point is, let's not be against it because you want to see a short-term gain in Tesla. If Elon thinks it makes sense to merge the two companies, he's going to have to make the case for everybody else that it needs to happen now and not 18 months from now or 3 years from now. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And then of course, it's going to have to be structured enough so that Tesla shareholders think that this ratio between the two companies is attractive enough to vote for. It's one thing for Elon to want it. It's another thing for him to sell it to shareholders. So at the end of the day, that's where I come down on that.
I think people also have to realize whatever anyone thinks what is going to happen, we don't know. Like the assumption that Tesla alone would give you higher returns in the next 12 months than a merged entity is complete speculation, of course. You might be right, you might not be right. There might be a delay in robotaxi. There might be an acceleration with orbital AI. There might be surprise government contracts for SpaceX, which we can be sure of, by the way, in my opinion, that there was massive defense contracts coming very quickly on a massive scale. So, I wouldn't be so sure about these things. And to your point, yes, it sounds a little lame, but we have to trust Elon to some extent because we are living through the singularity and things are moving extremely fast. Look at Anthropic. Anthropic has a shot of becoming the world's largest company within 12 months or something from nothing. It's completely nuts. So
Amazing.
This is the singularity. Things are moving extremely fast. If you're Elon, you have limited time and management attention. Having a merged entity and thinking in a singular mission, right, to create abundance and also infinite AI and everything is much, much easier in a merged entity for him. So I think we have to see all these probabilities and balance them out. So Søren, to wrap it up, here comes the key question. In a merger, what do you think in terms of concrete numbers? Is it a merger of equals? Does it mean Tesla shares will now approximate the value of SpaceX automatically? Will the market say, well, since this will be a merger of equals, probably have to boost Tesla. So even if they wanted to pay a premium SpaceX to Tesla, they can't. And then there's a risk that Tesla actually, like for us, a positive risk. But what if Robotaxi actually does what we think it will do this year and actually reprice the stock to 1,000 or whatever? And then Tesla is worth more than SpaceX. Does that derail the whole operation? Like, can you merge SpaceX into Tesla or other way around with Tesla being more valuable than SpaceX? There are operational issues here because we are on a timeline. And finally, do you think Elon has an incentive of keeping Tesla down? Because that is a big question. Because if Tesla becomes bigger than 2 trillion, what do you do? How do you do the merger? Is that still possible? I think it's a problem. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it becomes a bit problematic. Certainly, it seems like a merger of equals is probably the easiest route. And if that happens now and SpaceX is at 2 trillion and the merger's announced, then Tesla floats up, where SpaceX also floats down. There's probably some middle point that they float to. But I think you do run the risk of, if Tesla gets way ahead of SpaceX, or if SpaceX happens to get way ahead of Tesla, which, by the way, again, I think there's some probability that's possible. And just a quick diversion there, SpaceX could easily announce contracts with Anthropic for orbital data centers. They've already announced intent or interest. I also understand they're talking to Google about this. So what happens if Google announces that they've contracted with SpaceX for 1,000 Starship launches, or whatever number of orbital data centers that might be? These are material things that could be announced anytime that suddenly could spike the valuation of SpaceX. So I think as Tesla investors, I think we have to be very careful with what we wish for here. We want Tesla to perform. We don't want SpaceX to perform. But you know what? SpaceX is not standing still at all. So I think this is very tricky. Again, this is why I say we have to leave it up to Elon's judgment here, because he's the only one that knows everything that's going on with these two companies. And there's more than any of us could possibly be aware of, particularly as it relates to government contracts and other commercial contracts potential, particularly as it relates to robotaxi ramping.
But I do think it is a very important debate, and I'm not blaming Rebellionaire for bringing this up, or people who are long-term investors who bet on everything and now are disappointed potentially, because I do agree. If I'm totally objective, I agree that Tesla running up and SpaceX sitting still or going down a little bit, which I think is the most likely outcome, because it will be very hyped. And I agree, it's not going to stand still, but Starship, SpaceX is very dependent on Starship being ready, and it's just not ready yet. And so Google is not going to sign trillions of dollars if they can't deliver it. So yeah, it can change in an instant. It can change by Q4, because Starship might be ready. We have this Wednesday, like a launch. So it's like a big deal. But if Tesla runs up too much, it's definitely not making things easier for the whole merger. It's going to be, if Tesla is 50% more valuable than SpaceX or something, which can absolutely happen, right, with a little robotaxi, then we have a problem. And that implies that there is a conflict of interest. Because of course, Elon could hold it back, right? And he's sandbagging robotaxi and everything. So I think building trust and confidence in the community is more crucial than it was ever before for Elon and the leadership, right? That everyone thinks it's all clean and tight, because there is doubt. And I think I understand where it's coming from, because it makes economic sense that there is doubt, right? Because I do think, to be totally frank, there is an incentive to not have Tesla go to 1,000 or 1,500 and not launch tons of robotaxis right now. I'm not saying that this means they're actually holding back, but I think there's a clear incentive.
It's interesting, because I think that a lot of that is probably projection. Like, for example, if I was Elon, right, CERN Basher is not worth $1 trillion. Therefore, I might try to tilt this in my economic favor. I don't think Elon operates like that. So I think a lot of those comments are people projecting their own thoughts onto Elon's behavior. I don't think that's right. For Elon, it is not about the money. It certainly may be about control, and it's certainly clear he has more control with SpaceX shares than he does with Tesla. Although with Tesla, he's on a path to gaining a lot more control with the success of Tesla's business. So he has ample incentive, I think, with both companies. I really don't think that Elon is intentionally trying to hold Tesla back and so on and playing that game. I don't think that Elon plays those games. And I think, by the way, he'd have to be very careful if he did that. If he made a comment to anybody on Tesla's team that, we're holding robotaxi back because I want this, that, the other thing, he's asking for a lawsuit and all kinds of problems if he does that kind of thing.
I also agree with you. I think there is a clear incentive. I think money doesn't matter, but frictionless execution matters. And if Tesla goes too big, it creates a giant headache for Elon. So there is an incentive of holding it back. But to your point, I think the way Elon thinks, he would never do that, because you are just creating massive potential issues. So for Elon, I think it's not about the money. It's about the leanest path, the fastest path. Tesla going up like crazy, not great. But interfering with anything creates potential massive disruption, right? Because if that then that would be very bad. And it's very hard to do it and not tell anyone, like, how do you even do it then? Because you have a giant team. So I think there's an incentive of holding robotaxi back, but I don't think they're doing it. That's my bottom line, because it's too risky and too complicated. And on top of that, if you're Elon, you also think about the world in probabilistic terms. You say, I can't even be sure of anything, right? So it's trying to steer some infinity complexity not smart. Better to execute first principles on both sides quickly and then do what needs to be done. I think this complicated 10D chess never works. And Elon definitely knows that because he's smart.
The way I think about it conceptually is that, and this is kind of silly, but I think it's instructional. Elon was sent to us by another planet. He's an alien that's here to help guide humanity to the next level. And I think if you look at it through that lens, as silly as that is, I think that helps understand a little bit his motivations. He wants to make sure that he gets to Mars in his lifetime. What does he have to do to get there? Well, literally, it's moving heaven and earth. That's his motivation. He is not worried about the short-term stock price of Tesla. I'm sorry to report it to you. He doesn't care where Tesla stock is this year, next year. He's trying to optimize the value of Tesla and SpaceX over the very long term. He's probably got a longer time horizon than anybody else. And that's, I think, what makes it very frustrating for investors, because we wish that he was a bit more short-term minded and could get us these little stair steps along the way. He's not worried about that at all.
He gave it away by saying, if anyone should have seen aliens, it's me. I haven't seen any. I knew it at that point. It's like, Elon, you're not human, you're an alien.
He's looking in the mirror.
Never looked in the mirror. So, yeah, very good, Søren. I think that was excellent. I think we gave the viewers a little bit of feel of what might happen here. So let's see what happens. It's going to be an exciting June with very likely IPO, and then we will see what happens. But I'm not selling any Tesla shares, that's for sure. And I think we will be in good hands because the most likely outcome here is that Tesla shares will be much higher than they are now. If you look at 2 trillion, what that means, and so on and so forth. So thank you so much, Søren. And we have more series with Søren coming up very soon. So see you guys there. Thanks, Søren.
Thanks, Joe.